The porch light was flickering again. It had been doing that for weeks, like the house couldn't decide if it wanted to welcome someone in or send them away. Inside, a little girl sat at the table, her feet dangling above the floor, waiting for a father who always seemed to come home too late. Tonight, though, something felt different. Something was about to change, quietly, but forever. If this story already has you wondering what comes next, give this video a like and subscribe. We share heartfelt stories like this every week, stories about second chances, quiet bravery, and finding family in the most unexpected ways. The porch light flickered like a tired heartbeat, faint and stubborn against the deep night. Caleb stood at the edge of the driveway, staring at it for a moment longer than he meant to. His boots felt heavier after 12 hours of crawling under sinks and rewiring fuse boxes. In his right hand, he carried an old toolbox. In his left, a brown paper bag with a single loaf of bread and a small carton of milk. The house looked still, too still. For a moment he wondered if she had fallen asleep. But then he saw her, a small shape curled on the top step, hugging her, knees to her chest. Elise, 9 years old and far too used to waiting for him in the dark. As he approached, her head lifted. Her eyes were red at the corners, tired but alert, holding the kind of patience that children should never have to learn so young. "You didn't have to wait out here," Caleb said softly as he set the toolbox down. "The light keeps going." "Hout," Elise replied. Her voice was thin but steady. "I thought maybe you'd need help seeing." He forced a smile. Not because he felt cheerful, but because she deserved to see one. "You're braver than me, kid. I would have run inside and hidden under the blankets. I wanted to make sure you didn't get lost," she said. Caleb reached over and brushed a stray curl from her face. "You're the only reason I ever find my way back." The light flickered once more, then steadied, as if deciding to hold. Come on," he said gently. "Let's get inside before this old bulb gives up for good." She stood. Her hand slipped into his without hesitation. Together, they stepped into the house, two souls clinging to the fragile warmth between them. The house smelled faintly of wood polish and the last of the autumn chill. Caleb set the bread and milk on the counter, his movements slow, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. Elise trailed behind him barefoot, her small frame almost swallowed by her oversized sweatshirt. The kitchen table sat in the center of the room like an old friend. Scuffed edges, a single deep scratch running across its surface. Caleb had found it at a yard sale years ago, sturdy, plain, and cheap. It had carried more than just dinners. It held whispered stories, homework tears, and nights when neither of them could sleep. Caleb sliced the bread and heated a pan of soup. Elise climbed into her chair, resting her chin on her hands. She watched him in silence, not out of boredom, but the quiet attentiveness of a child trying to memorize the way safety feels. "Long day?" she asked. "The usual," Caleb said. "Mrs. Jenkins' washing machine flooded her entire laundry room. I spent 2 hours fighting it." Elise smiled faintly. "Did you win?" "Barely," he said, setting a bowl of steaming soup in front of her. "Eat up, champ." They ate with the soft sound of spoons against ceramic. No music, no TV, just the hum of the old refrigerator. Her eyes wandered to the corner cabinet, where a square wooden box sat under a thin layer of dust. "Dad," she said softly. "What's in that box?" Caleb's spoon froze mid-air. His voice dropped lower, firmer. "It's not a toy, Elise." "I didn't say it was," she whispered. "Then leave it alone," he said, his tone gentle but edged with something unspoken. Elise nodded, but her gaze lingered on the box, as if it held stories she wasn't supposed to know yet. Caleb reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Some things aren't meant to be opened, not yet." The porch light flickered outside, casting a faint golden glow on the walls. The morning air was crisp, smelling faintly of wet leaves and distant chimney smoke. Caleb's truck rattled down the narrow street, its engine a soft growl against the quiet of a small town waking up. Elise sat in the passenger seat, legs swinging gently, her gaze fixed on the pale light spilling through the fogged windows. "You sure you'll be okay waiting there?" Caleb asked, keeping one hand steady on the wheel. She nodded, clutching her book bag. "I'll read, I promise." "Good," he said, his voice careful, as if weighing each word before it left his mouth. "No wandering, no touching, just stay in the lobby until I finish." The building loomed ahead, 3 stories of brick and glass, clean and imposing. Caleb parked in a visitor's spot, shutting off the engine with a low sigh. As they stepped inside, Elise felt a strange stillness. The polished floors gleamed like a frozen lake, and the air carried a faint scent of polished wood and coffee. Caleb led her to a leather armchair near the front desk. "I won't be long," he said, setting his toolbox down. "Stay here." "Yes, Dad." But the moment he disappeared down the hallway, Elise heard it, a soft melody rising and falling like a sigh. A piano. Drawn by curiosity, she followed the sound, her small steps muffled by the thick carpet. It led her to a glass-walled lounge, and there in the center sat a chessboard of clear crystal, its pieces catching the sunlight like fragments of ice and fire. Her breath caught. She pressed a hand to the glass, mesmerized by the fragile beauty of it all. Behind her, a pair of sharp eyes watched from an office door slightly ajar. The glass doors to the lounge creaked softly as Elise stepped inside. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, splintering into sharp shards of gold across the polished floor. The crystal chess set in the center sparkled like a crown of ice, each piece delicately carved, heavy with silent stories. She hovered near, the board hesitant. Her fingers itched to touch the night. Its polished surface caught the light, throwing a prism onto her sweatshirt. "Do you know how that one moves?" The voice was calm, yet edged like glass. Elise spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, poised, with a white blazer tailored. So perfectly it seemed part of her skin. Her hair was pinned up in a neat twist. Her shoes clicked lightly on the tile as she stepped forward. Elise swallowed. "The night?" The woman gave a single nod. Her eyes, cool and assessing, didn't leave the girl's face. It moves in an L shape," Elise said softly. 2 squares one way, then 1 square at a right angle, or the other way around. The woman tilted her head slightly, lips parting in a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's correct. Most adults don't remember that on their first try." "I read it in a book," Elise murmured. "But the book had pages missing, so I just practiced in my head." A flicker passed over the woman's face, quick, almost imperceptible, something between amusement and surprise. "Impressive," she said finally. Elise looked down, unsure if she was in trouble. "You're not supposed to be here," the woman added, her tone softening, "but I suppose exceptions can be made." Margot crossed the room slowly, her heels clicking a quiet rhythm on the tiles. She stopped opposite Elise, eyes still fixed on the girl. "Would you like to play?" she asked. Elise hesitated. I don't know if I'm good enough." "Then let's find out together." Margot reached out and gently lifted a pawn, setting it in place. Elise mirrored her, her fingers trembling as they brushed the cool surface of the crystal piece. The game began without fanfare. No timer, no audience, just 2 players and a board shimmering in the sunlight. For several minutes, neither spoke. Margot moved with precise confidence, her hands steady. Elise, smaller and unsure at first, grew bolder with every turn. She didn't play like a child memorizing patterns. She played like someone listening, tilting her head, squinting slightly, as if hearing faint voices in the arrangement of pieces. "Why did you move your bishop there?" Margot asked softly, breaking the silence. "It felt right," Elise said, "like the board wanted me to." Margot's brow furrowed slightly. An emotion flickered in her eyes, something sharp and unnameable. "Most people play by rules," she murmured, "but you're playing by instinct." "Is that bad?" Elise asked. Margot studied her for a long moment. "No, it's rare." A faint sound in the hallway, Caleb's boots on tile, broke the fragile stillness. Margot straightened just as Elise's father appeared in the doorway. His expression shifted instantly, from surprise to alarm. "Elise," Caleb said sharply, "what are you doing?" The girl looked up. "Playing chess, Dad. She asked me." Margot's gaze never left Caleb. "She's talented," Margot said calmly. "You shouldn't discourage that." Caleb's boots echoed in the polished hallway as he wiped grease from his hands with an old rag. He'd fixed the stubborn printer in record time. All he wanted now was to grab Elise and head home. But when he turned the corner into the glass lounge, his heart dropped. Elise sat across from a woman Caleb recognized instantly. Margot Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, the kind of woman whose reputation filled boardrooms with fear. And there was his daughter, small hands resting on a crystal knight, staring intently at the board, as though her next move held the weight. "Of the world, sweetheart," Caleb said sharply, stepping inside. "What are you doing?" Elise looked up, startled. "Playing chess. She invited me." Margot didn't rise. She regarded Caleb with the cool composure of someone used to being obeyed. "She's gifted," Margot said evenly. "You should let her finish the game." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, Mum, I didn't mean for her to disturb you." "She isn't disturbing me." "I appreciate that, but—" Margot raised a hand lightly. "One more move, that's all I'm asking." Elise's eyes darted between them, uncertain. Caleb exhaled, running a hand over his face. He didn't like this. This wasn't their world. Crystal chessboards and power suits didn't belong in Elise's quiet life, but his daughter's gaze held a quiet plea. "One move," Caleb said gruffly. "Then we go." Margot nodded once, her expression unreadable. The lounge door clicked shut as Caleb and Elise left. Margot remained seated, her manicured fingers still resting lightly on the queen piece as if it might slip away. For a moment, the room felt heavier. Sunlight no longer glittered through the glass as brightly, and the faint melody of the piano from upstairs had stopped. Margot rose slowly and walked back to her office. The heels of her shoes were silent now, each step measured, deliberate. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and paper. She moved behind her massive oak desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a small, worn envelope. Her hands, so steady, moments ago trembled as she unfolded the single photograph inside. A newborn swaddled in a pale blue blanket, tiny fists curled against chubby cheeks. Eyes shut tight in a peaceful, defenseless sleep. Margot traced the edge of the photo with her thumb. 9 years ago. She remembered the hospital lights, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the weight of a life she wasn't ready to carry. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, cold and unyielding. "You have a choice, the board seat or the baby. You cannot have both." Margot squeezed her eyes shut. The ink from her signature on the adoption papers had smeared where her tears fell. She remembered that too. The photograph slipped from her fingers onto the desk. Beneath it lay a folded note, the handwriting still sharp. "Her name is Elise. Please love her the way I couldn't." Margot's hand covered her mouth. For years, she'd told herself she'd done the right thing, that Elise deserved stability, not a mother clawing her way up corporate ladders, but watching the little girl move the crystal knight, like second nature, had cracked something in her. And for the first time in nearly a decade, Margot wasn't sure she could forgive herself. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the scarred wood, staring at the glow of his phone screen. It was nearly midnight. Elise had long since fallen asleep, her soft breathing carrying through the cracked bedroom door. The message blinked at him. "Thank you for bringing Elise today. She's remarkable. If she's willing, I'd like to invite her for another game. This weekend. No obligation, just chess. Margot Sterling." The name alone carried weight. The kind of woman who never asked for anything unless it served a purpose. Caleb rubbed a hand across his jaw, feeling the stubble scratch his palm. He didn't trust her. Not entirely. Not yet. But the look on Elise's face when she played, focused, alive, like she'd finally found a language she understood, haunted him in the best way. This wasn't their world. Crystal chessboards, marble floors, people with fortunes large enough to swallow small towns whole. And yet, Caleb's thumb hovered over the keyboard. He typed, "Thank you for your kindness. I'll ask Elise and let you know." Then he erased it. He typed again, "I'm not sure this is a good idea." Erased that too. He set the phone down and leaned, back in his chair. The porch light flickered once outside, then steadied, a soft glow cutting through the darkness. For years, he had kept Elise's world small, predictable, safe. Was it fair to keep it that way, If she was meant for more? Caleb stared at the ceiling, his chest tight with questions that had no easy answers. The ticking of the wall clock seemed louder now, each second a reminder of time Caleb couldn't turn back. His eyes drifted to the old pocket watch lying on the table, its silver casing scratched but still steady in its rhythm. It had belonged to her, Elena, Elise's mother. 9 years ago, Caleb stood in a cramped hospital room, holding a newborn so tiny he was afraid she might slip through his calloused hands. Elena had looked impossibly fragile, her dark hair damp with sweat, her skin pale as the sheets, yet her eyes burned with a fierce clarity. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise you won't let them take her." "You don't have to worry about that," Caleb said hoarsely. "You'll get better. You'll be here." She gave the faintest shake of her head. "This world isn't kind to girls like her. Keep her safe, even if it means giving up everything." A cough racked her thin frame. Her fingers tightened. "Around his, you're all she'll have," Elena murmured. "Don't let her grow up thinking she's unwanted." Caleb's throat tightened as he remembered the weight of that promise, the way the hospital lights hummed above him when Elena slipped away hours later. The pocket watch had been in her bag. He'd carried it every day since, a quiet vow ticking against his chest. Back in the present, Caleb rubbed a thumb over the watch's worn surface. Elise was sleeping soundly in the next room, unaware of how close she'd come to being lost in the system. Caleb had given up promotions, relationships, entire pieces of himself to keep her world whole. Now Margot Sterling threatened to open doors he'd worked so hard to keep shut. He wasn't sure if he could bear it. The gravel crunched under the tires as Caleb's old truck pulled up the winding driveway. Towering oak trees lined the path, their leaves swaying gently in the crisp autumn air. Elise pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide. She'd never seen a house like this before. The Sterling estate looked less like a home and more like a museum. Marble columns framed the massive front doors. The windows gleamed as if they'd been polished just for their arrival. Caleb parked near a row of sleek black cars. His truck looked painfully out of place, a relic among machines built for people who never worried about bills or broken appliances. "Dad," Elise whispered, clutching her backpack. "It's huge." "Yeah," Caleb muttered, his jaw tight. "Don't let it scare you, it's still just a house." But even he didn't sound convinced. Margot was waiting at the door when they approached. She wore a soft navy sweater this time, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I'm glad you came," she said gently. Caleb nodded stiffly. "This won't take long." Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something floral. Elise's sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as her gaze darted around. Paintings, in gilded frames, bookshelves taller than her apartment ceiling, and there in the center of the sunlit room, the crystal chess set. It sat on a pedestal like a crown jewel, each piece catching the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. Elise stopped walking, mesmerized. "Do you want to see it up close?" Margot asked softly. Elise nodded without looking away. Caleb's hand tightened around the strap of his toolbox. The crystal pieces clicked softly against the board as Elise set down her first pawn. Margot watched her with an intensity that made Caleb shift uncomfortably in his chair by the window. There were no words between them at first, only the quiet rhythm of play and the distant murmur of waves beyond the glass walls. Elise's brow furrowed slightly. She held a knight in her small hand, twisting it once before placing it down with careful precision. "Why there?" Margot asked softly. Elise didn't look up. "Because it feels like the board wants it there, like the pieces are talking to me," Margot blinked. The words hit harder than she expected. At 8 years old, she too had spoken of the game that way, of patterns that hummed beneath the surface, of moves that seemed to whisper their own logic. But her father had dismissed it as childish fancy, replacing wonder with drills, intuition with cold calculation. Now, across from her, this girl played with a quiet confidence, not memorized tactics, but instinct, raw and unrefined. Margot moved her rook with practiced grace. "You see the whole board before you decide, don't you?" Elise nodded faintly. "It's like I don't think about the rules, I just know where things should go." Caleb watched them both, his jaw tense. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd brought Elise here for one quick game, not for this strange, unspoken connection blooming between her and Margot. 5 moves later, Elise set her queen down gently. Check. Margot froze. For the first time in years, she felt the faint thrill of being cornered, not by an opponent but by a memory she'd tried to bury. The sun had dipped low, casting amber light across the Sterling estate. Elise was still in the lounge, studying endgame patterns Margot had shown her. Caleb stood on the terrace, hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles whitened. Margot joined him, her heels silent on the stone floor. For a moment neither spoke. "I know you're angry," she said quietly. "I'm not angry," Caleb replied, his voice low and taut. "I'm trying not to be." Margot's gaze drifted to the garden below, where autumn leaves lay scattered like gold coins. "There's something I haven't told you," she began. 9 years ago, I had a daughter. I wasn't ready. My life was complicated. I let her go, believing it was the right thing." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Go on." "Today, watching Elise, the way she thinks, the way she moves her pieces, I can't ignore it anymore." Margot's voice trembled. "She might be mine." The words hung between them, sharp as glass. Caleb turned to face her fully. His eyes, usually steady and kind, now burned with something closer to fear. "You don't get to say that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't just walk in and rewrite her life because you're curious." "I'm not rewriting anything," Margot said softly. "I just want to understand." Caleb shook his head. "She's my daughter, not a puzzle you can solve over coffee." A long silence followed, broken only by the faint echo of Elise's laughter from inside. Margot looked down, her voice raw. "She deserves to know where she came from." Caleb's grip on the railing tightened. "And what if where she came from breaks her?" Margot reached into the pocket of her coat, fingers brushing cold metal. She drew out a small silver watch, its surface worn but gleaming faintly in the fading light. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, extending it toward Caleb. His brows furrowed. He took the watch reluctantly, turning it over in his hand. "It was left with her," Margot said softly. 9 years ago I had it engraved." Caleb's thumb brushed across the back of the casing. The inscription was still clear despite the years. "Love her the way I couldn't." His stomach clenched. "You left this?" His voice was quiet, but it carried a dangerous edge. Margot nodded, her eyes unflinching. "It was the only thing I could give her at the time." Caleb shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You don't understand. That watch has been her anchor. When she's scared, she holds it. When she feels alone, she asks me to wind it so it won't stop ticking." Margot's voice cracked. "It was my way of saying I never stopped thinking about her." "Then why now?" Caleb demanded, his voice rising. "Why wait 9 years to come crashing into her life?" Margot's eyes glistened, but her tone stayed steady. "Because the moment I saw her move that night, I knew. I've spent years convincing myself she was better off without me, but now I'm not so sure." From behind them, a small voice interrupted. "Dad?" They turned to see Elise standing in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Why are you fighting?" Caleb froze, the watch clutched tight in his hand. Margot crouched slightly, her voice soft. "We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're figuring things out." The sunroom was bathed in golden light as the three of them sat around the crystal chessboard. The earlier tension still lingered like a faint storm, but Elise seemed determined to clear the air. "Can we play a game?" she asked softly, her hands folded in her lap. "But this time, you and Dad against me." Caleb blinked. "2 against 1? That doesn't seem fair, kiddo." Elise shook her head, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "You'll need teamwork. I'm harder to beat than you think." Margot chuckled faintly. "She's probably right." Caleb hesitated. He wasn't sure if this was a good idea, but Elise's eyes held that quiet fire he'd seen since the day he first held her. "All right," he said, exhaling. "Let's do it." The game began slowly. Margot and Caleb leaned toward each other, whispering about their moves while Elise watched them with calm focus. "For you see the board differently," Margot murmured to Caleb as they debated a strategy. "So do you," he replied, "but maybe that's not a bad thing. Every move felt like a conversation, a chance to test trust, to give and take, to see. If two people from opposite worlds could find a rhythm. Midway through, Elise tilted her head, studying them. "You're learning," she said, "to play together instead of apart." Caleb glanced at Margot. For the first time all day, they shared a small, genuine smile. The crystal queen glimmered in Elise's hand as she set it down. Check. Elise's fingers hovered over the final move. The room seemed to hold its breath as she set her queen. Down with delicate precision. "Checkmate," she whispered. Caleb leaned back, exhaling a slow breath. "Well, you were right," he said softly. "2 against 1, and you still wiped the floor with us." Margot smiled faintly, but her eyes glistened. "You didn't really lose," Elise said gently, tracing the edge of a crystal pawn. "You worked together. That's the whole point." The words settled heavy in the air. Margot's smile faltered. She lowered her gaze, her voice breaking. "Elise, I don't deserve your kindness. I wasn't there when you needed me most. I let fear make my choices, and I can't undo the years I lost." Tears streaked her cheeks now. Caleb shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. Elise watched her quietly for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I don't need perfect," she said finally. "I don't need someone who wins every time or knows all the right moves." Margot looked up, her breath hitching. "I just need someone who stays," Elise whispered, "that's all." The simplicity of her words cut deeper than any accusation could. Margot pressed a hand to her mouth, sobs escaping as she nodded. "I can stay," she said hoarsely. "If you'll let me." Caleb glanced at his daughter. She gave him a small, brave smile, the kind that said she'd already made her choice, and for the first time Margot felt the faintest flicker of hope. The porch light flickered as Caleb opened the door. He hadn't expected visitors, especially not her. Margot stood, there in a simple coat, hair pulled back, a small terracotta pot cradled carefully in her hands. Inside, a young sapling reached upward, its delicate leaves trembling in the evening breeze. "I know it's late," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of hesitation. "But I needed to do this in person." Caleb stepped aside, without a word, and she crossed the threshold for the first time. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old pine. Elise's laughter echoed faintly from her room, where she was humming to herself, unaware of the quiet moment unfolding by the door. Margot held up the sapling. "I brought this for Elise, for both of you, really." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "It's a red maple," she explained, her fingers brushing the leaves gently. "When I was a little girl, my grandmother told me planting one meant you believed in second chances. I thought maybe we could plant this together." He studied her for a long moment. The woman standing here felt different from the one he met weeks ago, less polished, more human. "Second chances?" he asked quietly. Margot nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Caleb, or even trust me right away. But I want to try to grow something steady this time." Caleb's eyes softened slightly. He glanced toward Elise's room, then back at Margot. "Let's see if it takes root," he said. The table creaked softly under the weight of mismatched plates and steaming bowls of soup. The aroma of fresh bread filled the small kitchen, blending with the faint scent of earth from the sapling Margot had placed on the windowsill. Caleb poured water into 3 glasses, his movements careful, deliberate. Margot sat across from him, her posture less rigid than before, though her hands still fidgeted in her lap. Elise, perched between them, swung her legs under the chair, humming a tune only she seemed to know. For a long moment, no one spoke. The clink of cutlery and the occasional crackle of the porch light outside were the only sounds. Then Elise broke the silence. "You know," she said, tilting her head thoughtfully, "this feels different." Caleb glanced at her. "Different? How?" "Like a puzzle where all the pieces are finally on the table," she replied. Margot smiled faintly, her eyes shimmering. "That's a lovely way to put it." Elise set her spoon down and looked between the 2 adults, her small hands folded. "What if we tried?" she asked softly. "Try what, sweetheart?" Caleb's voice was gentle. "To be a family," Elise whispered. "Not perfect. Just us trying." The words hung in the air like a fragile promise. Margot's throat tightened. Caleb exchanged a glance with her, something unspoken passing between them. He reached for Elise's hand first, then Margot's. "We can try," he said quietly. Outside, the porch light glowed steady now, casting a warm halo around the house. And for the first time in years, it felt like home. The little red maple swayed gently in the evening breeze, its new leaves catching the last gold light of day. On the porch, Elise sat between Caleb and Margot, her small hands resting in theirs. "Do you think it'll grow?" she asked softly, glancing at the fragile sapling. Caleb smiled. "If we take care of it, it will," Margot added, her voice quiet but steady, "just like us." The porch light hummed to life above them, warm and steady this time. And for the first time in years, it felt like this house wasn't just a place, it was a beginning. Elise looked up, her eyes shining. "Let's try to be a family. Even if it's messy." Caleb and Margot exchanged a glance, then nodded together. "Yes," Caleb said, "one move at a time." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. We share quiet, powerful stories like this every week, stories about second chances, family, and the beauty of simply showing up.